Hey, what's up guys? Troy here, BT Moto, and we're here to talk about how to prep your bike on the dyno and put your bike on the dyno and dyno it and get the numbers that you want to see from the dyno and make sure that there's no variables that maybe make your bike lack in power. So let's go over the basic checklist of how to prep your bike for the dyno. Today we're using our beautiful 2021 M1000RR shop bike. And first thing you're going to do is make sure you have gas, full tank of gas. Do not drop this off your dyno operator with no gas in it, with a light on and saying, hey, you go ahead and fill it up, because it's probably going to cost you $20 a gallon, or they're probably just going to shoot you out the door. That's step number one. Also, make sure your chain has good slack in it, properly adjusted, and also you want to make sure that it is lubed. Sometimes we've seen even a lube chain will give you like 1 horsepower. It's kind of wild. So make sure it's properly lubed, not a big rusted chain that's not going to do you any good right there. You also want to make sure your bike is properly oiled, not some 10,000 mile marker oil changes. Make sure the oil's nice and clear like you got right there, and that it is also in the window where it's supposed to be on the bike. And also a very important note here, guys, make sure that dash comes on. Make sure there are no cells. Make sure there's not some weird thing. Make sure there's not a hiccup with your bike when you're riding it. Make sure there's not a pre-existing issue with your bike. You want it in perfect running order. If there is some kind of cell, you want to make sure it's because you know what that cell is for and it's not due to a mechanical error in the bike. Also, real quick note again about the gas. Make sure it is a high quality gas. We recommend Shell V-Power. If you don't have anything like that around you, just make sure it's a gas that's of high quality, because we've seen some people with gas come in here, let's say, base gas from like a military base here in the States. Sometimes that stuff is like goopy and black, and it can really mess up your power, pull ignition, and you won't get the power you want to see. Next, you want to make sure this bike is up to operating temperature. So if you can't get the bike up to operating temperature, if you have to trailer your bike to the dyno, for example, just make sure when they strap it, it is up to operating temperature. And I'll go over that in a second here after we talk about the strapping. Next step, guys, we're going to make sure this bike is strapped properly to the dyno. So we'll make sure it's up on the chock all the way. We got that front tire nice and secured to the dyno itself. And then these straps, guys. This stuff is vital to make power here. If you want to make the proper power you want to see, you don't want to make sure you go to a dyno where the guy's standing off to the side and wheels just hopping on the dyno. That doesn't do anything for the numbers. It's just going to skew results and make the graph look horrible. So when you put these on here, make sure you secure it. I usually like to make sure it's either a flat down, or even usually we have like a little bracket here where we pull it forward and even pulls it tighter against that chock. And you want to make sure that the tightness of this ensures that when you sit on the bike, that there's no extra slack in the tie down when you sit on it. So if I sit on it, there shouldn't be any play in this tie down. So I'm sitting on it, no play. If you're sitting on it, all of a sudden there's a bunch of slack in there, you want to redo that strap or tighten it down and make sure it's nice and level here. If you want it swinging to the left, swinging to the right, nice and level. Then also, before you strap it down and after you strap it down, you want to make sure you run it on the dyno itself, meaning you spin the back tire in first gear, make sure it gets a lot of resolutions, almost just let the clutch out, let it spin. That way it'll straighten out perfectly on the dyno. So next step here, guys, we want to make sure this bike is properly ventilated. This is a very, very, very important step. Not only just for the bike itself, but for you and your personal health. You don't want to be breathing in the fumes that come out of this bike depending on what fuel you're using. You don't want to be breathing anything at all, actually. What you should have is actually a fresh air intake and fresh air exhaust, meaning there should be some kind of system coming from the roof of the shop that brings fresh air in from the outside. And actually there's fans on the front of the bike that actually push all of that fresh air to the front of the bike, meaning the radiator is cooled down and the inlet is getting fresh air as well. For the exhaust portion, there should be something like this over here, where you have the exhaust going straight out into an exhaust tube that actually sucks all of that out of here, because you don't want the bike suffocating on its own exhaust fumes. There's a reason why it's exhaust, because it's not good to cause peak combustion anymore on the bike. That's also going to make you lose a lot of power and also make you lose a lot of health if you don't have proper ventilation. So don't go to a dyno where it's up on a trailer, they have it up against a wall, and there's like one bed fan right there on the inlet, and there's nothing on the radiator. There's nothing really on the intake, and then they're just shooting that out the back. It's super hot in there. That's not good for combustion. You want to make sure that the IET right here is getting nice, cool, fresh air, because the IET is going to dictate ignition on these bikes, and if it pulls a whole lot of ignition or if it gets heat soaked, you're going to reduce a lot of power for the bike. Next, we're going to talk about warming the bike up. If you didn't ride the bike to the dyno, this is how you're going to warm it up if you take it off fresh off the trailer, which most of you are probably going to be doing. After you get everything done that we've talked about, strapping it down, ensuring everything's in good running condition, good ventilation, We're going to start the bike up, and after we start the bike up, we're going to start running it. I would not run the front fans yet. I would just run the exhaust fan to get the exhaust out, and then make sure your combi or your screen is on the coolant temp so you can monitor exactly when we're up to running temp. We're not going to be beating this thing up on the dyno. Don't just start slamming gears first through 6 up to the red line. We're going to cruise this thing in 4th gear or 5th gear until it gets to an operating temp, which shouldn't take too long with no fans on the front of this thing. Doing this is going to ensure that we have the oil up to temp, which the oil, when it gets up to temperature, is going to create a not as viscous fluid, basically. So it's going to be something that doesn't hold the engine back. It's going to be more watery instead of the syrup kind of look to it. That's very important. And we're going to make sure the tire is up to temp, because if the tire is not up to temp, we're not going to make any power on this thing. If the tire has too much temp in it, we're also not going to make power. So we're going to go over that in a second as well. You can see here now we've got 202 degrees. This bike is warm coolant wise, and because we ran it in the dyno, it should be warm as far as oil goes as well. If you look at the tire here, you can see I'm running this. I'm getting about 100 degrees in this tire right now, which is good. It should feel a little bit sticky to the touch. Don't mind the appearance of this tire. But yeah, it should feel a little bit sticky like that. And then of course, after we run this thing on the dyno, it's going to expand, it's going to get hotter. We just want to ensure it doesn't get too hot. All right, next guys, and this is an important one. You want to make sure wide bands are connected properly, or wide band, or whatever you're using here. Typically we use 2 for redundancy, and that's to ensure that one is not malfunctioning and they both should be reading about the same thing. Now, the sniffer method in the tailpipe here is going to give you accurate information basically on the top end of bike, not mid-range, not low end, but the top end stuff, which is cool. A lot of dyno operators, what we're seeing here from a lot of the sheets that we get from customers, the problem is going to be that the dyno operator has not set this up correctly. It has a pinhole somewhere in this thing, or it's not set up right. It's getting fresh air. It's getting inaccurate data. The thing is, if your bike's making 200 wheel, making 190, it's strong. It has a nice strong power curve, and there's nothing wrong with it. Your bike's gonna be fine. If it's reading 19.0, for example, there's no way that bike will run 19.0 and have a 200 wheel horsepower hit. There's no way that's gonna be possible. If you want the most accurate data possible, you're going to want to put this somewhere in front of the Y pipe, like behind the connector or the collector, and up by the head here. That's going to be the most accurate information you're going to get. Most places are not going to offer that to you. They're just going to throw a sniffer in the tailpipe, so that's why we're kind of focusing on that. But I'm just kind of letting you guys know that just because you see an AFR curve and your power curve is perfect, but the AFR is not perfect, and it's showing, oh, it's a roller coaster, and it finishes at 15.0. My dyno operator says it's running lean. If the power curve is perfect, the bike feels perfect, trust the bike. Believe me on that, because a lot of times this data is inaccurate or corrupt just because the dyno operator might be lazy, or they just kind of never got told exactly the right way to do this in the first place. Okay guys, so now that we have the bike ready and set on the dyno, now let's talk about the tuning on the bike. Usually a lot of what you guys will do is you'll put the bike or these BMWs on the dyno tuned, flash it back to stock, and then start making your passes. That is completely the inaccurate and wrong way to do this thing. First, what we're going to have to do is flash this thing back to stock. That is correct. We're going to flash it back to stock first thing. But then we're also going to reset the adaptations using our GS911 tool. So I'll show you guys how to do that right now. All right, guys, this is the GS tool here. And you can see it's an OBD square port. We also have it with the round port if you have the older bikes. But this thing is basically an amazing little box right here. We can do diagnostics, we can do logging, reset adapts. There's so many things that this thing does for a BMW. I think it's a must-have if you own a BMW, in my opinion. So once we've connected this to the bike, you can open up the program here, which also has a app you can run on your phone. You can do everything from your phone too. We're just going to run on the computer, so you guys can actually see what I'm doing here. So I'm going to go to detected vehicle from the main screen here, engine controller, service functions. And while this is loading, just so you guys know, it runs the voltage right there of the bike. So 13.1, still good. And that's because we ran the bike in the dyno. We have a nice good voltage on this bike. It's going to require a certain amount of voltage to do any of this stuff. So first we're going to reset the mixture. Just go down the line here. Continue. It's going to reset, and you can hear it switch off. Switch on. Okay, that's complete. Now we're going to go to knock sensors. And resetting the adaptations here, we're going to go through this list, guys. Resetting the adaptations is basically a way for your bike to reset everything back to 0. Meaning the bike's not learned anything now, and it's going to start learning as soon as we put this file on the bike. It's not going to give us any corrupt data, basically. Then we're going to reset twist grip. And this stuff becomes out of sync right here, the twist grip and the throttle valve. And it may actually give you a little bit of power because it may be inaccurate data as far as how much twist grip you have on the bike. Maybe only giving you like 90%, but it thinks it's giving you 100%. Now it's going to ask me to go to 100%, 100% valve, there you go, open, and then it's going to ask me to close it. Now it's closed. Turn it off. Turn it on. And then we're going to go to our throttle valve reset here. Yep, let's go ahead and continue. Off. Back on. Boom, there we go. Now our adaptations are completely reset. It's going to ask us to go ahead and start the bike up and make sure the fans, because we did the knock sensor, the fans are up to temp. So once you start the bike up, go ahead and let the bike just idle until the fans come on. Then she's ready to start doing some dyno pulls. And again, this is after we put the bike back to stock. This resets everything back to 0 again, so we can get an accurate number for stock. Okay, now that we've done the adapt reset, we're ready to actually make some pulls on the dyno here. So first thing we're gonna do is turn the fans on. After we turn the fans on, we're gonna make our first pull. After the first pull is done, we wanna verify that the AFR, the air-fuel ratio, the sniffer is working correctly. If it's off, or if there's something going wrong and it's just shooting all over the place, fix your sniffer first, then do another run, make sure that sniffer is good. We want to make sure the sniffer is good before we start making pull after pull after pull, because then we're getting inaccurate data and we're just doing pulls for no reason at all here. So let's get that done. So you guys see what happened on that first pull right there? We did that intentionally. It blew the sniffers right out of the back of the bike because they were not secured properly. So what we like to do is get the sniffers in there, bungee cord those things up, make sure they're not going to fly out of the back of it, because if these things move too much, even during the pull, if they start moving, it's going to give you different data, even while it's moving in and out of the pipe. We want to make sure it's secured in one exact spot. Now that we've got the sniffer secured properly, we're going to go ahead and do another pull on this thing, but on stock only requires 1 to 2 pulls, because on BMWs, because it's not full-time closed loop the way we're doing it right now, and the margin for error is so small, it only requires about 2 pulls for us to get a good number. The carcass of this, I just checked it again, another 100 degrees, so we're still good there as well. So let's go ahead and make that pull. So now that we've secured the sniffer on here, we're going to go ahead and get this pull going again. I didn't explain to you guys that we're going to be doing this in 5th gear, and the reason why we do this in 5th gear is it's as close to as what the dyno is capable of. We want as much data as possible. If we could do 6th, that'd be great too, but we're doing 5th because it doesn't go exceed 200 miles an hour. If it did exceed 200 miles an hour, the dyno would stop reading. It's not capable of reading over 200 miles an hour. So this allows us to get a pull for as much data as possible in 5th gear and able to get us the most accurate data possible. Alright guys, we have the stock file here. You can see 191, 192, pretty respectable stuff, but it's basically repeating a number. They're going back and forth here. It's flattening out at the top. We have some flat spots. There's definitely some work here to be done, so let's go ahead and load the tune file and see what that does. right here, we've still got low 100s right here on our temperature gauge.
Yeah.
Low 100s means this is not too sticky, this is not too bad yet, but again, this is a stock tire, so it's not going to be bad. If you have a drag max or some kind of slick on here, this thing's going to get really hot, really fast, and give us an inaccurate data, meaning the power will start to roll off up top. That's one thing we don't want. So we're always checking this on the tire, and the tire is also going to expand while we're doing this as well. So there's a lot to be said about a few things here. All right, so looking at our mod runs here, guys, you can see we are repeating a number here, 205. So well, from 185, 186 to 201, 204 to 205. You can see those are nice, smooth runs. The M1000 is notorious for this, for the M1000 box, that little dip there on the 2021s and 22s. And you can see our AFR does look a little bit lean. And you're like, oh, well, 13.2, 13.1, whatever, that's lean, guys. Well, yeah, it is. We have a tailpipe sniffer, and the further away we get from the head, it's going to be running a little bit leaner and leaner. So don't nitpick stuff. If your bike is making 205 wheel horsepower on pump gas, I really wouldn't complain. It's making great power. The bike is obviously happy. The tailpipe sniffer, like I said, will look a little lean on the graph there because it's reading not farther away from the head. Closer to the head we get, the more accurate this data is going to be. But this is great data right here. Great runs. All right, guys, now we got accurate data on what a properly ventilated cell will do for power on the bike. 205, amazing numbers. What we're going to do now is turn all the fans completely off, meaning all the intake fans will be off now. We're just going to run this thing with no fans on it and see what the power is. And then we're also going to run this straight into the inlet. This is 530 CFM. This is like a basic crazy leaf blower. We're going to run this straight into the inlet with all the fans on and see if that makes a difference too. And over here, off. Everything is now off right now. So we're gonna let this thing choke on itself, run it warm just like this, and we're gonna show you exactly what an improperly ventilated cell will do for power numbers. All right, guys, let's take a look here. Now, keep in mind, this is all tuned, okay? All of these runs right here are tuned. I'll go over the stock in a second here, but these are just tuned numbers right here. So we went from 195 from Adaptations, right? It's resetting, and we made our way up to 205, respectable number, and then you see it start repeating, 205 to 205 right there. And then we put the leaf blower right up there on the inlet, 207. Not only do we have proper airflow, but now we've got the air blower on there, straight into the intake, which is 530 CFM, big right there. That's 2-wheel horsepower. And then taking it off of the bike, all the fans, nothing on this bike, letting it choke on itself, 202, it lost 5-wheel horsepower from that peak run there. So overall here, again, same tune, guys, same AFR, same set it and forget it. We went from 195 to 207. That is a 12 horsepower variance. So that means if you go to a dyno tuner and they go, oh, I can retune your bike, for example, they can make a variance of 12 wheel horsepower depending on settings and how the bike is when you come in. So again, it's good to be well informed about this stuff. Really well. I mean, this is the most important stuff right here. This data is crazy right here, just on airflow and adaptation reset. So here's the tune files, guys. You can see right here, making 207, that's with the blower right in the front of the bike, proper ventilation, making big power. And this just goes to show you right here. So we went from 191 to 207. Huge gain, right? With everything done properly. Now I did show you guys that if I went from tune file 195, or let's just say it went from this tune file right here, I can go, wow, look at that tune file. This is what BT does and they're trash, and look what I did over here. And it's the same file, guys, same file. So again, if doing everything properly really makes a difference. Just throwing 3 things of this, no proper ventilation, not doing everything right, it makes a huge difference. And like I said, the variables, even with the bike, just putting the oil right, having the proper fuel in it, making sure the bike is mechanically good, the sniffer, all these come together to make a great number right here. A great number. I mean, that's insane. 207 versus 195. We didn't change anything on this bike. It's the same tune file from the start, from 195 to 207. That's just from adaptation reset after we put the tune file back in there. All very important. So just a brief overview. Make sure the bike's good. Make sure it's strapped properly, sniffing good. Then we go from stock, and if you have a tune file on the bike, you go back to the stock file and reset your adaptations properly. Then you get your stock number, same day, same fuel, same strap, same time if you can, and then go back and make that power number with the tune file. And the tune file, the stock file should be like 1 to 2 pulls. You should be fine right there, because like I said, there's not a whole lot of variance with the adapt right there, because it's pretty much spot on. But with the tune file, when you start adding timing to it, it needs to learn that. And that's where it's going to pick up that power. It takes about 10 runs to get you a proper tuned run file that's going to get you your peak numbers that you're going to want to see right there. I think that's going to wrap it up, guys. So I'm just going to take this bike out for a spin, actually. This thing looks like a blast. See you guys in the next one.